I'd say maybe, I don't think everyone here actually knows
really
about the lessons.
Oh, okay.
Because everyone is in hip-hop.
Fine.
So
oh, really? Okay, fine. In the 1980s, a friend of mine and I, through various circumstances, which are not really that important, made a couple of records that got a lot of attention in the U.S. and internationally because they were, I guess, kind of the first records of their kind. They were hip-hop records and dance records that were made completely out of other records. They weren't records that had an original drum track or an original bass line and other samples and sound effects and things. We made them completely out of it. We made them on an 8-track multi-track recorder, state of the art at the time. And they were made completely out of other records. So they were these collages that held together. I should also, before anyone gives me credit for having worked on this in any way that I didn't, my partner was an expert studio engineer who could nail this stuff in his sleep, because that's what he did for a living. He worked on radio commercials for record companies, and he was an expert at making one record go into another seamlessly underneath someone talking. Because that's, like these commercials were like, for the Eagles, or for any of these stupid bands, that would, some gravel-voiced announcer would come on, you'd hear a little bit of music and then he'd go, the new album. And then the music would change underneath them and he'd go, by the Eagles, Hotel California. And then just at that point, Hotel California, like this. And Douglas was expert at this. He and I had been hanging out at rap clubs for about a year and listening to records and talking and screwing around in the studio. I was a writer in an advertising agency, and I also put on dances where I lived in Brooklyn that were sort of for, luckily for me, were for people who would dance to pretty much anything as long as you only played about 15 minutes of it at a time. So this was before specialized dance clubs, people who would, only dance to, techno, and only Detroit techno, and only this kind of Detroit techno. So this was more like I could play rap music, and rap didn't have a social connotation and other than like, oh, this is nice. And so I could play that for 15 minutes, and then I could play old rock and roll, and then I could play a bunch of other things. So I brought a whole bunch of records up to this guy's studio, and we made our first mix. The reason that anybody even knows about me at all is because the first record that we did was made for a contest that about 60 or 70 DJs in the New York metropolitan area entered. And we won, much to our surprise and much to everyone else's surprise once they met us. Because it was run by Tommy Boy Records, and we went down to the record company to meet all the people there, and they took one look and said, wow, old white guys? Like this. And it was like, yes, old white guys. And so we made a couple of other mixes after that because we were having such a good time being VIPs in the world of hip-hop, where we had previously been, the people behind the velvet rope. Now we were the people breezing through the velvet rope. So it was like, oh, this is fun. So with the first record that we did was made around the Globe and WizKid record, Play That Beat, Mr. DJ. That was the thematic base of it. It was a remix of Play That Beat, Mr. DJ, and we threw in every damn thing. There were commercials in there. There were pieces of goodness knows what all. Old records, new records, all kinds of stuff. And then we decided that we wanted to make a James Brown tribute record. So we made that. That was actually called, the first record was called The Payoff Mix. The second one was called Lesson 2, the James Brown Mix. Because the reason they're called the lessons is not because we have such an inflated idea of how much we know, but because I had a lot of spoken word records. I've always been a fan of listening to people talk and talking to myself. And I had records, dance instruction records, that had this portentous guy going, Lesson 3. And so we used those. And then we made another record called The History of Hip Hop, Lesson 3, The History of Hip Hop, which is actually never gone out of print, even though it was never actually officially in print. It was a promotional item. and disappeared from the Tommy Boy warehouse after a while, but it's been in print as a bootleg continuously since the late 1980s. You can still go to stores in New York and buy it. You know, it's got a red label on it, and I have a couple of copies of it myself. And then, of course, The Ultimate Lessons, which some of you have probably seen, which was a bootleg compilation of bootleg records. Amazing. From which I made nothing, in case anybody's sitting here thinking, oh, this millionaire is sitting here, you know, talking cheap. And that's pretty much the size of it. I still do advertising work, although I no longer work for a large advertising agency and haven't for a long time. I produce things. I have produced lots and lots of industrial films. I've done music for features. I write and produce radio commercials with and without music. And I do remixes of records and things like that. And I DJ. Now, one of the reasons that I do not use vinyl anymore is about the time gangster rap happened, my old white guy sensibilities kicked in, and I went, you know something? I don't like listening to this. This isn't fun for me. So I kind of tuned out of rap music at that time and just got involved with other kinds of music, because I've always been involved in a lot of other different kinds of music, old jazz from the 20s, and folk music, and various other kinds of things. And when I tuned back in, one of the things that had happened was turntablism had happened. When I tuned out, scratching was somebody rubbing the record back and forth a little bit, and if they were really great, they didn't, you didn't hear the backspin. You just heard the whoop instead of the whoop like this. Well, when I came back, all of a sudden, Shadow, Cut Chemist, Qbert, and I was, wow, what do you know? So I tried DJing a little bit, carrying bags of records around, and it was a little, well, I didn't really feel I was giving people value for their money, because all I was doing was playing records. And people were like, well, that's very nice. I don't really want to tour the world as an oldies act, because what will I do the second time around? It'll be the same records and it'll be the same old me. And I can't compete with guys who spend $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 for records, because that's what they do. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life hunting for the rare 7-inch that I don't have. I got rent to pay. I got family obligations and things like that. So that's not really available to me. But what is available to me is software and computers, because I now am a full-fledged audio producer in my own right, using Pro Tools, and I perform on a laptop using Ableton Live. I don't know how many of you people know it. It's a really great piece of software. It's different from Pro Tools as a production tool because it is not hardware dependent. It'll work on a PC or a Mac. You can set it up without having an external box. If you want to, you can run the audio out of the headphone jack of the computer. It's really not recommended if you're going to be doing anything that more than 3 people are going to be listening to, because the sound is crap coming out of a headphone outlet. But you spend $100 for an external audio card and you're ready to go with a tremendous amount of stuff, and it's a lot cheaper than Pro Tools. Plus, it is more versatile in some ways than Pro Tools. So after about 15 years of using Pro Tools, I've switched over to Ableton, which is not really a commercial for Ableton. There's people who can run rings around me on Pro Tools. So this is just my most of the opinions I give are not, the world of vinyl is coming to an end and you should all switch over to using laptops. This is not the thing. I am not a very good vinyl DJ, which is why I use a laptop and a bunch of external fancy-ass boxes, because that's better for me and I feel I give a better show. And it allows me to mix a lot of different kinds of music, which is much more interesting to me than playing just hip-hop. I got nothing against hip-hop. I love hip-hop. That's what we listened to in the car on the way from Dublin, and I was smiling the whole way. But I don't want to play it exclusively because it's just not that much fun for me. So I play Brazilian, I play African, I play funk, I play whatever I can get my hands on that I think I can get away with. And the nice thing about it is that I can do it using a laptop. And that just about brings me to the end of my long breath here. So does anybody have a question? Questions?